the decaying of our leadership, especially as we move away from the machinery that makes myths of them. So we don't know what people on the ground thought of Lincoln when Lincoln was Lincoln, or Truman was Truman, or FDR was FDR. But since we moved away from them, and in the interest of making America seem like some sort of ancient Athens, which even ancient Athens wasn't ancient Athens, we have historians hard at work creating these sort of titans of humanity. And I think they probably look just like they do at the moment. We've suppressed that media that said those things about them, and we've replaced them with all kinds of very, very talented writers who've, displayed their wares, turning these normal human, ordinary, mediocre human beings into magnificent creatures. I'm not denying that a magnificent creature doesn't occur, and it probably occurs much more often than we think. We're dealing with one right now. If anybody saw No Direction, Complete Unknown, that was the name of the film. Bob Dylan and his legacy and his path and his, that's a very, very unusual and very antisocial, very difficult, possibly very destructive, I don't know, but obviously a magnificent human being in some fashion. They're all over, all the time. We just turn our attention, and maybe that is a fault of today's culture and media, that we're so seeking the gloire, we miss the quality. So we've been trying ever since Picasso or Dylan or Stravinsky or Nijinsky or Nureyev or pick whoever you like. There are millions of them, unlike that awful chap writing about the library bookshelf, the European library bookshelf. There are probably millions of them all over the rest of the world, but in the West we focus on Einstein and stuff like that. Democracy, like making a play, doesn't need leaders, trust me. It needs a cast of participants flying close to their best, and these players are rare. They are out there all over, but the industry does not include them, which makes them rare. Do what the best boss says. Is the idea a good one? Almost never, but the process is comprehensible to the rest of us as architects. It is our myth. Some super talent leads. And this is the essential myth that scuppers our democracy, which is really, as the snarky libertarian will say, a republic ruled by the few. They snark this because they hate democracy as much as any Hakeem Jeffries. And I'm just only tearing at the hypocrisy. That's all. I don't have really a solution. It's extraordinary to watch, to be in the middle. History 1,000 years from now will talk of America, I suppose, as decaying at this moment, the end of the great empire, like I would read about the end of the Roman Empire and why it happened and who the great figures were, who fell and who failed to maintain it. And I'll read all sorts of explanations, and now I realize that I am in one of those that 1,000 years from now will be written about, if we're still here, if we haven't boiled ourselves to death. And I was thinking, I think about this constant refrain about Western civilization. The great thing about Western civilization is that if you argue its supremacy, if you argue against its supremacy, they say, oh, no, we're not a supremacist. We just are the best. In other words, as an identity, a Westerner cannot exist being not the best. And I'm quite comfortable with saying it's rubbish. It's a rubbish civilization. It's a very manic one. It built a lot of stuff being the operative word. It expended a vast amount of energy. It's killed extraordinary numbers of people. It's destroyed the planet. It has its signature religion has made idiots of us all. That's the nature of what religion does. Don't explore, just believe. You know, whatever you want to say about it, did this and it did that, it did this and it did that. There's no evidence that anything that Jesus said wasn't said 30,000 years ago, sitting around a campfire. We don't know. We've just made all that up. You know, we've written the history since then. We've made the movies. You know, I always think about those movies that they make about cavemen, you know, and they create this sort of imagery that cavemen were like, ooh, ooh, you know, with Raquel Welch for some reason in the middle of them all, you know, and they deny that the loyalty, the connection, the sharing, the collaboration, the organization, the courage, the morality that must have existed for these really encumbered bipeds to exist into the present era is just staggering. And then we keep stumbling across works of art that they created. All we focus on is how much they killed each other, because that's our obsession. That's a post-religion obsession, or the religions as we see them. You know, where people die and kill for ideas, which is the last thing you should do. There are other reasons to die and kill, I suppose, very few, but not for ideas. You know, the idea of Western freedom is ridiculous. We're no more free than anybody ever was in the world, ever. We have more stuff. I suppose we have rights to complain because we have the space and the time to complain, or some of us do. We still have a plebeian class that we keep quiet manically. And, and you know, in areas, and I've lived in some of those areas. I've lived in London, I've lived in New York. I'm living in parts of the Western world where all of our fruits, all of our gains are very clearly right in front of us. And as this whole thing began, one of these chaps, this Slobodan or John Helmer, I can't remember which one, pointed out that people that they knew and respected a great deal, who are now past, would write about the great Western powers and say the problem is that the people who run them are just not very bright. And you know, you sort of think about that and you go, well, that's not possible because look at all this stuff that they maintain and control and all. And then go ahead, look at it. Tell me, how great is that? If I look at the Brooklyn Bridge, I'm looking at something great. I'm not looking at the architecture. I'm looking at the engineering and the building. That is magnificent. If I look at Bitcoin, I don't get the same feeling. It's just smug.